welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. My name is Jessica Lorimer. I am your sales coach, leadership expert, and today, somebody who has officially been announced as a #1 Amazon bestseller. Woo, woo, woo! I am officially throwing confetti, knocking the tops off of champagne bottles. Well, actually, I will be doing that this weekend. Not quite yet, but that is how I'm feeling inside. So thank you to all of you who have bought a copy of Smart Leaders Sell the book. You can still get it on Amazon. You can still get it from any Amazon country or any country that has Amazon in it, and leave reviews and let me know what you think. But as officially announced yesterday, we were #1, shortly to be taken over by Gary Vee, but there was that moment of being #1, so it was all fantastic. So today, I'm really excited about this episode because I came last week and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't record an episode about the event yet because it would mean that Scott would have to work weekends. But today is that day. It is event overview day, and I'm really, really excited to share some of the key wins and the key takeaways that I had, even though I was the one running the event. So just to give you a little bit of context, we rocked up Saturday, the 10th of February. I think a date that will always now have to go down in my head as history making. But we rocked up at the Ritz on Saturday and it was phenomenal. Okay, I had a number of issues beforehand because obviously when you're planning out events, you like to think that everything's going to go well. In reality, we had some of the copies of my book did not turn up. The printers that we used, had delays on delivery and all this kind of thing. And that's not what you want to hear the day before an event. Needless to say, we did rock up on Saturday to the Ritz London, which was our venue, which was absolutely phenomenal. And we held the monetization event of the year. And, I really have to put it clearly, it really was the monetization event of the year. The speakers were absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, they included myself, so take that with the pinch of humble pie that it's intended. But we had some incredible speakers. We had some incredible stories. We had some actionable information that just people walked away and were blown away by. And in fact, we set up a private Facebook community for event attendees. And all week that has been buzzing with key takeaways, with people who are actioning new things in their business as a result, with people who've identified holes in their business plan and who are now fixing those. So it's all going really well. And how could I leave my poddies out of the goss, right? Because ultimately, I want to share it with you. I want to let you know what we kind of covered in the event, how it went, and the key takeaways that you can take and you can implement into your business this coming week. So let's talk about the event and who we had. So event obviously held at the Ritz, very, very classy venue. And you had a multitude of amazing women and men who arrived to celebrate, their own wins in business, but also to learn how to scale their sales and skyrocket their profits even further. And speakers, we had the amazing Amanda Ruiz, who is my own PR expert. She is the person who handles all of my PR opportunities and is, working always very hard in my business to put out pitches, to put out press releases, and to help with visibility of my brand. We had the amazing Helen Packham, who is a thought leadership expert and a speaker beyond belief. Helen has actually spoken for a TEDx. She did a TEDx talk in Brighton a couple of years ago. We had Dan Meredith, who, if you don't know, is more commonly referred to as the beast of business. Not entirely sure whether that says that he is dominating the business world or whether it is he is a hairy werewolf type individual who happens to be good at building businesses. I'd personally go for the second, but obviously Dan is somebody who has been invaluable in my business journey. And we had the amazing Jen Hall, who is one of my clients, and she came in. She's a clarity expert. She talks all about clarity, messaging, and communication. And then we had the fantastic Kirsten Clark, who came in and gave us an amazing talk on how to map out your book. Incidentally, wished that I'd heard the talk before I wrote my book. So note to you all, if you are thinking about writing a book or doing something like holding an event, perhaps watch a talk on them first before you go ahead and do it. It will actually make your life a lot easier. So those were the speakers of the day. And the talks were incredible. There were some kind of key points from each talk. that really resonated with me. And I'm going to probably start with those key points and then move into the takeaways that I think you should be using, in your own business, and the advice that I gave to the attendees. Because ultimately, when we attend these events, it's really easy on the day of the event to think, I'm so motivated, I'm so excited, I can't wait to get home, I'm writing my notes on the train, I'm getting really excited about all the things I'm going to action in my business. And then a week later, we realize that actually, alongside client delivery, alongside sales, alongside working in our businesses, that it's very, very difficult to make these things happen, and all the good intentions that we had kind of go a little bit by the wayside. So I'll give you some tips on that as well. So let's talk about takeaways, shall we? Because ultimately, if you can't make an event, the worst thing is when you hear everyone saying, oh my God, that talk was so inspiring. And you're like, oh, was it? Oh God. And there's this huge feeling of like FOMO, or as my nana calls it, FOMO. We had a little bit of a giggle about that yesterday. It turns out she'd read my book, and her big question of the whole thing was, I really like your book, Jessica, but FOMO, why do they call it FOMO? At which point I promptly spat out my mango juice that I was drinking at the time and said, A, it's FOMO, and B, it stands for fear of missing out. And she went, oh, right. So if you haven't read the book yet, just to make you aware, it's not FOMO, it's FOMO, and it stands for fear of missing out. So I digress. The first talk of the day that we had was Amanda Reese, and she was talking about PR that pays. Now, I'm somebody who is a huge advocate of PR, and I was talking to somebody this morning about this, in fact, that PR really was pivotal for my business at a time, when everyone else was setting up these Facebook groups. They were really driving the traffic into having these online communities and being present, or being what I called ever present, and hustling in these free communities that they built. I was focusing on getting PR. I was focusing on building my brand. I was focusing on getting credible insights in my business, because ultimately what I wanted was a steady stream of qualified leads who were actually going to pay me. And I was seeing that the trend for Facebook groups was going woefully downhill. People were just going in there. Nobody wanted to buy anything. Everyone just wanted tons and tons and tons of free information. And your business can't survive on that. Your business can't survive on just giving value, which is unfortunate because, typically when we are coaches, consultants, when we set up businesses, we do it because we believe we have a skill or we have a product that can genuinely help people. Unfortunately, if they don't pay for that, it means that you end up resenting them and you end up in a financial bind, which doesn't help you. And this is what I was seeing. I was seeing this vicious circle and this cycle of people who were doing lots for free, giving tons and tons of value, but never monetizing it. And I didn't want to end up in that trap. I knew that I wanted my business to be successful for the long term. And so for me, PR was something that I focused on very early. One of the first activities that I did in my business was to get a blog of mine featured in an online publication at that time, which was called Women's Prospects. Now, unfortunately, my business outlived Women's Prospects, which I was really sad about. It was actually a great online publication. But one of my first ever activities was to write a blog for them because I wanted traffic. I didn't have any audience. I needed traffic. And so Amanda came in, she did this phenomenal talk on how to get PR that pays, i.e. how to get PR that is actually going to lead to you generating clients. And the big takeaway that I had from that, surprisingly, was not read the news and, talk about things that are relevant, because we're all doing that anyway. We should be all doing that. It was actually about identifying your press hook, and she talked about this idea of having a particular press hook or something that you are particularly known for, and including a golden nugget within that. And the example that she used was of an Olympic swimmer, Adam Peaty. And she said, who knows in here that he couldn't actually swim? As a kid, he was terrified of water. And yet here he is, 10, 20 years later, an Olympic swimmer. And that was his hook. That was his golden nugget. People were really interested in that, because how do you go from being a child terrified of water to an Olympic swimmer? It's very, very different. And so the big takeaway for me from that was about what is my press hook? You know, in the online space, I'm very, very well known for sales. And I'm very well known for talking about sales and for getting people great results with sales. But what's the golden nugget? What is it about me that makes people interested? What is it about me that needs to go in the press? What is it about me as a person that makes me somebody that other people want to resonate with, want to follow? And that's what I got from that perspective. It was really interesting in starting to turn it away from the business and looking at what your business does versus what you do, and getting PR through the kind of person that you are and through the personality that you have, rather than just the sound bites that you give. So that was my key takeaway from Amanda's talk. And it was phenomenal. You know, it was really, really interesting. And I would advise that everyone goes away today and thinks about, what is my press hook? You know, she talked about a client who was a huge Jimi Hendrix fan. And she said, you know, he got into this huge magazine because in his bio, he wrote, I'm a huge Jimi Hendrix fan. I love playing the guitar. And it turned out an editor at the magazine was also a huge Jimi Hendrix fan. And it automatically made it an easier sell. It was easy press. Okay. So think about that when you are pitching for television opportunities, radio opportunities, blogging opportunities. Think about, okay, what makes me different? What makes me different as a salesperson? You know, one of the things that I came away from was that as a person, I'm very different to traditional sellers. I'm very eccentric. I'm very quirky. I'm 28 years old, operating in an industry where my big competitors are people like Grant Cardone, you know, who grew up with the Wolf of Wall Street style sales, who grew up with hard selling and, you know, assumptive selling and high pressure, high reward selling. And that's not who I am. You know, I go completely the other way and I talk about relationship-based marketing, relationship-based sales. And so the thing that makes me different is that in a world dominated primarily by men, I'm a 28-year-old woman saying, actually, I think it's about your personality, because people buy from people, and that's what's going to make you the sales. It's about then finding those people who love you and who love what you're selling, right? So start thinking about what it is that does make you different and that is going to be useful when it comes to crafting that press hook, okay? Because it's a huge, huge thing. And when we live in a world which is pretty much instant gratification, short attention spans, we need to really be thinking about, what is that one thing that makes you stand out? What's that one thing that makes you different from everyone else? And we need to be putting that into our PR opportunities and the opportunities that we're seeking, because ultimately it's the same thing. People buy from people. They want people who are interesting. They want people who are exciting, eccentric. They don't want people who are vanilla, boring, and dull. Okay, so when you are looking at PR opportunities, make sure that you're different. Find a way that you disrupt your industry. Find something in your personality or character that makes you different to the rest of the people who are going out there and doing the same job that you do. And you'll find that makes it a lot easier to get publicity, and certainly makes it a lot easier then for that piece of publicity to bring you qualified leads, people who genuinely do want to buy from you because they already resonate with your characteristics, your personality, the information that you're giving, and they are going to want to spend money with you. Okay. So that was the first talk, and it was absolutely incredible. Really loved it. We had some face masks that were awesome. We had a face mask of Will and Kate, or Catherine. Not necessarily sure on what you're supposed to call Will and Kate at the moment. I'm guessing, obviously, it's the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and that's that. Oh, it's not actually, is it? Cornwall. Gosh, can't even get the royal family right, but I think it's Catherine. I'm pretty sure. So anyway, we had some face masks. It was a really, really invigorating talk, and it covered off the 7 steps that you need to ultimately get yourself in the press and to start generating incredibly qualified leads from that. So that was fantastic. And then we had the amazing Helen Packham. And if you haven't gone and checked out Helen yet, please do. Helen is a former client of mine. She is phenomenally successful in her industry as a thought leader, as a speaker, as somebody who's really changing the game for female entrepreneurs who have children. You know, Helen was the original, what I like to call the original mumpreneur, the original gangster, if you like, of that space. And she came in and did this awesome talk about standout leadership. And what's so interesting about Helen's talk, and my key takeaway, was, again, it linked in very nicely to Amanda's and to some of the other talks that we heard that day about going left when everyone else goes right. So she was talking about thought leadership, and the context behind it was that no idea is a new idea. And so her whole premise was, you know, the idea itself may not be new, but the way that you explain it, the way that you convey it will be. And that's what thought leadership is about. It's about looking at all of the old, you know, and I'm saying that with inverted speech marks, but it's about looking at all of the old ideas that are already around. And it's about thinking, how can I go left when everyone else is just following this path on the right? What is it that is going to make this difference for me? What is it that's going to make it different for my audience? How can I view my business in a way that is objective and gives me some perspective and looks at how can I make my business operate in a way that stands out from the crowd, even though I may be using information that is no different to what people in my industry are teaching. You know, a great example of this that I always think about is the health and wellness industry. You know, for years, we've been told by doctors and health professionals everywhere, if you want to lose weight, eat less, move more, right? It's simple, super, super simple, but we don't do it. And so the game changer came in, you know, one of the game changers, because that industry changes very, very quickly, was Weight Watchers. Okay, Weight Watchers came in and changed the game, not because they were teaching anything particularly different, right? The information is still the same, eat less, move more. But what they were doing differently was that A, they were asking people to track it, and B, they were asking people to be held publicly accountable. Go to a Weight Watchers meeting, be weighed in front of 20 other people, feel proud if you've lost weight, and feel like you need to step it up a gear if you haven't or if you've put weight on, right? So they changed the industry. They went left when everyone else is going right. Everyone else is still doing eat less, move more, do more exercise, and it just all melded into one. And Weight Watchers came along and said, be weighed publicly, have public accountability, have a way to be proud of the weight that you're losing, or, you know, have a way to inspire yourself and motivate yourself if you need to lose more. And that's a huge, huge thing. So that's a really good example of, you know, companies going left when everyone else is going right. And again, I looked at my own business in this, and I looked at the kind of takeaways that I was getting, and I was thinking, well, how am I going left? How is my business going left? And one of the big examples in my business is that this podcast, in fact, is a big example of us going left. Generally, people in my industry don't want to share tips, right? They want to share the what, but not the how, because they're scared that if they share the how, their audience will go and do it themselves, and then they'll make no money. This podcast, every Friday, we have a live coaching episode. I tell everyone, here you go. This is exactly what you can have. You can go away and do this right now. We live coach people through problems. They use those strategies actively to change their business. And that's a huge, huge thing. That's an example of my business going left where everyone else is going right, where lots of people are doing webinars that show the what, but not the how, you know, where they're opening Facebook groups and they're giving some tips and value posts, but they're not actually walking people through it. This podcast is my left. Okay. And I want you to start thinking about that in your business. Where is your left? Where is your left turn? What is it that really makes you different in the sea of people who are perhaps teaching what you teach or selling what you sell? What's the difference between them and you? Okay. And again, it ties in so nicely to that PR, having that press hook, you know, having that hook that is different, that makes you stand out. And it's very, very interesting that the talks really focused on, not on, you know, if you use Facebook, you're going to be more successful than if you use LinkedIn, because obviously we know that's not true for a start, but none of the talks focused on tools. All of the talks, all of the speakers focused on, you have to find the strategy that is right for you, and you have to identify what is different about you, what is different about your audience, and make that work. when it comes to monetizing your business. Okay, so it was really interesting. Helen's talk was really interesting. She deconstructed the premise of the original idea, which was really interesting. And ultimately, she really focused on monetization through being different, through accepting almost that it's okay to not be selling anything that is particularly different from the norm, but that the way that you communicate it is going to be how you monetize it. And the way that you are seen to show up with that idea, the way that you promote it, market it, etc., is going to be the most important thing for monetizing or having what people feel is a standout idea, even if it isn't necessarily that different from what's currently being put out to market. Okay, so that was hugely interesting. I got an awful lot from that. I love anything about thought leadership. Really interesting talk. Helen also had some fantastic diagrams, which I really loved. She'd drawn out, she talked about hare brain versus tortoise brain. And she'd drawn out a hare and a tortoise on these amazing pieces of flip chart paper. And that made my day, because I've never, ever, ever seen anyone do those kinds of drawings. And it was just phenomenal. It's really, really good fun, really interesting talk. And everyone walked away with a lot from that about, USPs and how we really are unique in the market. So we had that. And we had a little bit of a break. We had some networking, had some coffee, some shortbread, which was lovely. And we had Jen Hall's talk. So Jen came in, and she is the clarity queen. She is the person that you want to go to if you're not sure who your ideal client is or how you are going to serve them. And, she works with people alongside messaging and clarity, ideal client work, that kind of ideal client framework piece, to make sure that ultimately you know who you're looking for and how you're going to help them. Because if you don't know those things, even if you're the best sales coach in the world, cough, cough, wink, wink, it's very difficult to help people make money. Because to make money, we have to be clear. We have to know what we're selling and who to. And if you don't know that, it's very, very tough. So anyway, Jen came in and did an interactive mastermind session on creating a sellout product or program. And this is really interesting because, over the course of my business, we're talking 3.5 years, almost 4 years this year of being in business, I've created literally hundreds of offers. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of offers. And so you always tend to have that element of not arrogance, but, there's going to be nothing new here. I've heard it all before. And actually, one of the key takeaways for me from Jen's talk was that sometimes you need to rehear things. Sometimes we get so caught up in saying, yes, I know that I've done that we actually don't hear the lesson. And so we miss out on the golden nuggets. We miss out on the bits that actually we needed to redo. And when I was looking at Jen and I was watching her go through this interactive session and we were all doing the work and she brought along a fabulous workbook and things, when we were going through this exercise, instead of creating a new product or service, what I was doing was looking at some of the ones that I'd released in 2016, which was the year of 63 offers. Never do it. Honestly, never, ever, ever release more than one offer a week. It will almost kill you. But needless to say, I was looking while she was holding this masterclass at the offers that I had that hadn't worked as well, that hadn't sold as well. And so instead of going through the process and looking at how can I create another sellout launch or offer, I was using the process to reverse engineer why some things didn't work as well as others. And it was really interesting because some of it came down to, did I communicate it that well? Did I have what Jen terms the success island, or what I would call the ultimate transformational outcome, mapped out? Was it really what they wanted, or was it what I thought they wanted? So it's really interesting for me to be able to reverse engineer that process and look at it from that perspective. And that was my key takeaway, was that sometimes we can feel like we've been in business for a while. We've watched all the webinars. I've listened to all the podcast episodes. So we kind of feel like we retain that information at the same level we did, what I would call the same sponge level that we did when we first heard it, and that we will naturally always apply it. Unfortunately, over time, we don't. We start taking the shortcuts. It's kind of like when you learn to drive, and I don't know about anyone else, but when I learned to drive, and I passed my test, I said I was going to be the best driver ever. I was always going to check my rearview mirror before making a turn. I was always going to indicate correctly, and I was going to do it regardless of if there was somebody there or if there wasn't. I was always going to be the driver who let other people out and was considerate. And I love to say that I am that driver, and 90% of the time, I am that driver. 10% of the time, I am the road runner. Like, I am road rage fueled, nightmare. I need to be somewhere. Why the hell are you driving in front of me at 2 miles an hour in a 40 mile an hour zone? I'm that driver. And that's because I've now got 10 years of experience. I know when I have to indicate, and I know when other people don't. I can read the road. I can do these things. I have these skills now that I didn't before when I started. And that's made me, in some ways, a lazy driver. Sometimes I don't check my rearview mirror because I know that there's nothing there intrinsically. If I'm driving down a country lane on my own, sometimes I don't indicate anymore. I'm just like, wow, no one else here, nobody cares. Now, if you're a policeman or police woman and listening to this, obviously please don't write to me and tell me that my driving is terrible, because I do promise you that 90% of the time I am a fantastic driver, very considerate road user. But the example is there that sometimes, we get complacent. We forget what we have already learned. We forget how eager we are to do all of the steps. And I see that a lot. I have some clients who will run through sales strategies, and when we're working together, they'll do them perfectly and they'll get amazing results. And then 6 months later, they might come back to me and they say, I ran that strategy again. It just didn't work as well. And I'll say, that's really odd. What happened? And when we talk it through, it turns out that actually they just skipped the market research step because they already knew it from last time, or they didn't send out that extra email because they figured their audience didn't need the urgency. So it's just little things, but because they're not doing the entire process, it doesn't work as well. And that is the same when it comes to plotting out your next program, plotting out your next product, making sure that it sells out. You have to do all the steps. You really do have to do all the steps. And that's what it came to me. My biggest takeaway was, where am I not? When I create my next product or program, where do I need to look first? What really do I need to be focusing on? What are the steps, that sometimes I'm missing out that actually are integral to the process, right? So we had Jen's talk, and that was phenomenal. And then we had Dan Meredith, and he completely shook up the room, dropped more F-bombs than I can imagine. And there were some bits that were quite challenging, I think, for a lot of the audience. I think the primary kind of people in the room were female. And you know what? In the online space, when you come into the online space as a woman, and I'm putting this into context for all you guys that listen to my podcast, when you come into the online space as a woman, it's a kind of like a weird world. It's you are transported into this place where photo shoots are key, where, luxury lifestyle has got to be a thing, where you have to travel and you have your nails done all the time and you have to drink mojitos on the beach, even if you're not the biggest rum fan. And that's the world that you're dropped into. And it's all very fluffy and it's a little bit vague and everyone's very nicey. It's actually quite passive aggressive, I would say. It's quite passive aggressive unless you find a real solid community, and you naturally gravitate towards people who are also straight talkers. It can be a little bit, right? And if you've met Dan Meredith or consumed any of his content, you know that Dan is not, okay? Dan is many, many things, but vague, fluffy, and is not one of them. So he came on and he did this talk, and when me and Dan were talking about what he was going to be doing for his presentation at the event, we decided on building a personal brand that pays. Because ultimately the thing, the big difference between Dan and myself is that he is a content machine, right? Dan loves creating content. He has an audience that is about 5 times the size of mine. He's very active on social media. I'm like a hermit in comparison. I like automated content. I like showing up live in the places that I really want to show up live. I would never do a live stream on my personal profile. That would just not not work out for me, mainly because my friends would take the mick mercilessly for weeks. But there are just things that I enjoy doing, and relaxing, and Netflix is one of those things. And Dan is somebody who's been very, very successful at building a personal brand, and a very different personal brand to the one that I've built. And so his talk was really focused on what you need to do. And ultimately, the key takeaway from his talk was you have to be you, and you have to find the formula that works for you. And again, it came back to, this idea of what's your unique selling point? What's your unique brand? What's your unique profile within the market? Now, Dan's obviously is that he's a fairly straight shooting individual. He's very much, he swears, he likes to simplify. He's very much about visibility. That's his kind of core messages within his strategy, is that you've got to be super visible and you've got to build this large awareness of your brand. My personal brand is slightly different to that because I am a little bit more introverted. I like to work smarter, not harder. I don't like having to do everything live. I like automated content. I like funnels. I, enjoy bringing in quality leads to my community. I don't necessarily always like focusing on free traffic because it takes a lot of my time and I don't have tons and tons of time, right? So our personal brands are different. As a result, the way that we produce content is very different. And so the big takeaway for me from Dan's talk was the way that we want to operate and ultimately the businesses that we want to grow. And it comes down to that belief that you really can build the business that you want. Dan has built a personal brand that is evidently able to be monetized. The guy's got like 500 people in his membership. And he's built that by becoming almost like a character online. He's built this large personal brand. He has become this character. He shares very openly struggles, wins, all of these things. And it's daily. He does this every day without fail. He shows up. He is live. He is there. And I look at that and I think, oh my gosh, I could never run that business. I would not want that business because what happens when you go on holiday? I don't want to have to post my bikini pictures. I don't want to have to do lives when I'm sat by the beach. I just want to sit there and read my book and do my thing. I want to be alone for a little while. I'm somebody who likes my own company, dancing around my living room, doing the thing, putting the laundry away. It's all glamour, right? And so actually his talk really hit home for me that you get to build the business that you want, not the one that you think you should have. Because I looked at it and I could see, my other half came with me to the Ritz and he was kind of like, Dan's talk was hilarious. I thought it was really funny. He said, but I wouldn't want you to run that business. And I was like, that's so interesting because our lives are different, and when you look at who you are and the kind of business you want to run, it's ultimately going to be determined from your lifestyle. Maybe you have kids, maybe you don't, maybe you're in a relationship, maybe you're not, maybe you want to travel the world, maybe you don't. Maybe you really love the social aspect of entrepreneurship. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just want products so you can be a little bit more detached. It's all very variable. That's terrible grammatically, but we'll roll with it. It's variable depending on who you are, on your personality traits, and on ultimately the kind of business that you want to achieve. But we have to remember that doesn't have to limit your income. It's not to say that if you aren't a Dan Meredith, if you are not somebody who wants to show up and produce live content every single day, that you will not be successful. It's not to say that if you're not a Jessica Lorimer and you don't have automated funnels or automated content going up, that you are not going to be successful. It's about using these specific elements from the event and ultimately from business lessons that you're picking up every day and saying, okay, well, how can I monetize my business in the way that works for me? And for some of you, that will be building a large personal brand. And for some of you, that will be building a brand around your business and saying, actually, I don't want to be the face of it. I want to sell it in 5 years. So I want to be a little bit removed. I want to be somebody who's working ostensibly in the business so that the brand can be sold later down the line. And those are just choices you have to have a think about. So that was Dan's talk. It was really interesting, like I say, full of swearing, full of some shock facts and things like that. But it was really, really solid and interesting presentation. It really made me think about, what is the business that I want to build? Am I really building the business right now that I want to have in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? Is that going to work for my lifestyle? And I'll go into that in another episode. Otherwise, we're going to end up here for like hours, which as much as I'm sure that you'd love that, it's also probably commuter hour and you need me to get finished up. So after Dan, we had our key talk from Kirsten. She again did an interactive session on mapping out your book. And the big takeaway for me from Kirsten's talk or Kirsten's session was about simplifying, and really breaking down the opus into something much more manageable. So I get a lot of clients who want to write books. And, I've had a lot of people say to me over the last couple of weeks since my book has come out, I wish I could write a book. And I'm like, well, you can. But for most people, they get stuck because they're focused on this big end goal, which is ultimately a printed book full of pages with tons and tons of information. And that paralyzes them. They can't see a way to get out of that headspace where they have to sit down and write the entire book in one sitting. And so Kirsten did this fantastic exercise with people where she helped everyone break down the book into themes, into chapters, into subheadings, and all of this kind of thing, which actually makes it a lot more manageable. When you're sat there thinking, oh, well, actually, I only have to write this particular subheading today, and then chapter 1 is done, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more doable in your brain. It makes it easier to cope with. So have a think about that. If you are somebody who's thinking about writing a book, or indeed embarking on any kind of big project right now, break it down into manageable bite-sized chunks. Think about, what is it that you really want to achieve, and break it down into bits that are going to be easier for your brain to process. And then finally, we had my talk. And, I really enjoyed it. The audience, luckily, also really enjoyed it. So that's always a good start. But my talk was about profit plans, because so often we build these businesses and we believe that when we build it, people will come, buyers will come. And actually, that's not always, unfortunately, the case. So, the talk that I did was very much around, are you building a clear profit path? And the key takeaway, because obviously I'm not going to give you my key takeaway because I wrote the talk and it would be a bit weird. But the key takeaway that most of the audience walked away with was, you get to build your profit plan in the way that suits the resources that you currently have. So one of the things that I talked about was, what are your resources right now for your business? Are your resources time? In which case you will probably be doing a lot with organic traffic, trying to use lots of free marketing methods, organic marketing methods where you're not paying upfront to build your audience, and to sell to your audience. Or is your resource money? Perhaps you're spending an awful lot of time on client delivery, on, working on your business, and actually you don't have the time to go out and spend in 3 to 5 Facebook groups posting all the time. So your resource becomes cash, and you decide to invest that into paid advertising, into done-for-you services to make your life a little bit easier and get better results. Either way, there's no judgment on whichever you use. It really makes no difference. Everyone goes through periods in their business where they will have one or the other resources. Nobody starts, or very few people start with both. But the way that you craft your profit plan is highly dependent on the resources that you have available. So for example, one of the big mistakes I see people make is that they'll start out, they have a tiny audience, and they'll have this small audience and they'll go, yeah, I want to set up a membership site. And I'm like, oh, that's not a great idea, because A, it's very low cost. So it means that the profit you make is minimal, which isn't going to cover, mortgages, outgoings, all that kind of thing. Also very high churn rate. If you start a membership, you do have a churn rate. You do have people drop off every 3 to 6 months. So then, you're taking this hit on profit, but also you're having to find and replace these people every 3 to 6 months. So if you are somebody who has a smaller audience, actually it makes more sense to find the premium offer that you can sell first. Make the most profit in the shortest time, and then you get to reinvest that into traffic. You can, reinvest that into growing your audience and move your profit plan out from there. That's when you can start spiraling into group programs, membership sites, hybrid things, masterminds, all this kind of stuff. And so the key takeaway for people was, what are my resources right now? And am I selling accordingly? And have a think about that when you're, going about your week this week and you're thinking about the money that you're actively generating in your business. Think about what you actually have. What are my resources right now? If my resources are time, and actually I'm spending all of this resource on writing the copy for my website, building, my next email automation, and I'm not using that time that I have to build my audience or sell to them or deliver to my clients, then you're going to have a problem. Equally, if your resource is money, but you're spending that money on things that you don't need right now. So, say this is your first injection of cash from your business. You've had your first 5K month, you've had your first 10K month, and you immediately go and invest in something that is not going to necessarily make you money back straight away, like a branding photo shoot or, new website. That may not be the best decision for your money right now. You might be better off investing it in paid advertising, in a social media manager, in a done for you PR remit or something like that, that's actually going to help build and scale your business. So have a think about that this week. What resources do you have right now, and are you using them? And is that directly affecting your profit? Okay. And then finally, we obviously all went away from the event. Everyone was really excited. We went out for a few drinks afterwards. It was awesome. A few large glasses of wine were had, and it was amazing. And we came into this week, and I went into the private Facebook group, and I asked the question that I explained to you guys at the beginning of this episode, which is, how many people went away really motivated on Saturday and then, woke up on Tuesday or Wednesday and thought, oh God, I haven't implemented any of this stuff yet, and I have pages and reams of notes, and I can't see myself actioning them. And lots of people felt like that. It was overwhelming because they had so much information. And so the 3-step process that I gave to them, you can also use in your business right now. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like, oh gosh, I need to be implementing ideas and I've got tons on my to-do list, but it doesn't move. Think about this. Number 1, plug the biggest hole first. Okay, so when you attend an event, one of the things that it does is it flags up things that you need to fix. Okay, and some people, they think, I need to fix that gap in my sales process. I need to fix this marketing problem. I need to fix my pricing, right? Whatever your biggest problem is, fix that first. Eat the proverbial frog, for those of you who've read the book, okay? Once you've finished fixing that problem, you look at what's your biggest want. What's the biggest thing that the event or the podcast or the webinar highlighted to you that you really want to improve or do? Now, again, for some people, it's going to be sales. I want to sell more. I want to make more profit. For some people, it's going to be about improving their message. For some people, it's going to be finding PR opportunities. It doesn't matter what it is, but you look at your biggest want and you tackle that next. Okay, so you hire the coach, or you go out and you put the top tip into practice. You go out and you aim for the results. You change up your email automation. Whatever it is that you really want to do, that big desire, go and do that. So when I walked away from Upreneur, for example, the big want that I had in my business was, I want to write a book. I've been wanting to do it for so long and I haven't, and I'm here and I'm seeing all these amazing people who've written these incredible books, and I want to do that. And in order to do it, I had to plug holes. I had to look at, okay, well, I'm going to have to reduce some of the other things that I'm doing, and I'm going to have to look at the way that I'm presenting content right now. And that was a hole I had to plug. And then I moved on and I wrote the book and I got it achieved, and I can now move on to other things that I now want in my business. Okay, so you've got to be thinking about what's the big hole you need to plug and what's the big want. And then finally, and this sounds really, I don't know, really woo, really fluffy, but you've got to let shit go, right? You can't beat yourself up for going to an event, watching a webinar, listening to a podcast, and not doing every single thing. Because we cover so much. We're in an industry, we're working in businesses where we are bombarded with information every single day. It's overwhelming, it's overload. But ultimately, what we are seeing is that people are continuously adding things to their to-do list they just don't need. It's always, I've got to do this webinar, and I'm going to go out and create this funnel, and I'm going to go out and record this viral video thing, and I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And actually, we're so overwhelmed by all the things that we feel like we have to do, we don't end up executing. Whereas if we pick and plug our biggest hole, and then we pick and choose our biggest want to fill, we actually end up with a whole bunch of stuff that maybe we don't action immediately, but we do achieve, we do implement, we do exceed goals, okay? And so you have to kind of forgive yourself for not being superhuman and not being able to implement or action every single tip at once. And be okay with the fact that your notes might be in the drawer for a couple of months and that's okay. So there we go. To recap from today, ultimately, there was an awful lot that was shared at the event, but the key takeaways really are, in order to be successful in your business, in order to monetize your business, it doesn't matter what it is, product-based, service-based, anything at all, you have to be you. People really do buy from people, and you have to figure out what your unique proposition is in the market, what makes you turn left when everyone else is turning right, okay? You have to look at the time and the resources that you have available and look at whether or not you're doing the right activities to maximize those resources and maximize the long-term sustainability and profit of those. And then finally, plug the holes in your business, plug the biggest hole, and then choose your biggest one and take action on that. Make it happen. I'm really excited for you for this week. I hope it's going to be an amazing week. I can't wait to join you here on Friday when we have another awesome entrepreneur sharing their struggles with sales at the moment. And I will be back then to talk through some amazing coaching, and we'll be digging deep into visibility and selling every day and what that really means. I will see you in the next episode.